Please give a nice warm welcome to Dr. Needham, please. Thank you.
I don't need that. Okay, thank you very much. So, the rhetoric and reality of Brexit. It's important tonight's speech to sort of give you the context of how over the last couple of years populism has risen up and bad decisions are often made with wrong information. So Brexit is a perfect example of where all the experts, all the analysis pointed towards not doing it, but it happened nonetheless. So similar, you go back 100 years, World War I, World War II, bad ideas, but they happened. So things tend to happen when they shouldn't. So for this evening's speech, I'm going to give you a background, as Kevin mentioned, about where I'm from and how I grew up during the Troubles and the peace afterwards, and where I see us going with Brexit and the different types of combinations or permutations of the outcome. So just to give you a little bit of a context of what Europe is about. So I know on this side of the Atlantic there is a perception that the blue piece here, Ireland, is one country, but in fact it's not, it's two. So we have about a fifth of it is part of the United Kingdom. For Republicans or Irish nationalists, we call it the North. For Unionists, they call it the Six Counties or Ulster, even though there's two other counties which are part of Ulster, Donegal and Monaghan, which are in the Republic. We keep it simple. So the red piece here is what voted as a full union to leave the European Union. My career to date, so I grew up on the most southern tip of Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, bordering with the Republic of Ireland. So from there I went and studied at Queens University in Belfast for my undergraduate degree in economics. And when I was a student at Queens University, President Bill Clinton was over 4 or 5 times when I was a student there, and they were negotiating the Good Friday Agreement. So I remember being at the gates of Queens University, and the bodyguards of the president were all on the roof across the university on each road, and I was looking and getting excited about what was going to happen next. So I was there when it actually happened. After that, and this is the sort of story of how not having a border is important for us Irish people. So I lived in Northern Ireland, worked in Belfast, studied in Belfast, then I went and worked in Dublin, which is a different country, the Republic of Ireland. After that, I went to Scotland, which is part of the United Kingdom, do my master's degree. After that, I came back to Dublin, worked for a while. After that, I went back to England, lived in Leeds for a while. After that, I went to Switzerland, which is not in the European Union. After that, I came back to England, worked in London. After that, came into Belfast. And now I work in Limerick and Dublin, but live in South Armagh. So that story there shows that us Irish people move around a lot, and it tends to be part of our culture to emigrate and move. So my father emigrated when he was 16 from Achill Island on the west coast of Ireland to London. One of his sisters was 15. She emigrated to Ohio in America. Peter Herty here emigrated in the 60s. So it's a standard, and most of you here probably have some roots that moved around. So being able to move around is very important for us. So tonight's speech covers off a couple of different areas. As I mentioned, I'm going to go into a lot more detail about the border and what it was like and what it is now today. Then into the referendum, I'll give you a flavour of what the campaign was to leave and the campaign to remain, and then an analysis of the results and how that affected where we're going to go next and the actual outcome. Then some economic realities in terms of what Northern Ireland's economy is at now, socially, politically and economically. The Republic of Ireland, which is a totally different beast than Northern Ireland. Then after that we'll go into who's involved in this big debate about Brexit, who's going to have a say in what the outcome is, and it's a very multifaceted thing in terms of we have the British, the Irish, the Europeans, and a little bit of American involvement as well. Then I conclude the end of the presentation with some possible outcomes, the worst being what's termed hard Brexit, and the best being a united Ireland. But I'll give you my view and which is most likely. And at the end we'll have Q&A, so Paul will bring around a mic and we'll take a few questions then. So, the UK-Irish border in the recent past. So I will bring you over to this side, and we see here we have the map of Ireland. And if you remember the very cover slide of the presentation, the red part, Northern Ireland, is part of the UK. When we go down, this green piece is the southernmost part of the United Kingdom. which is South Armagh, the border region. And what we have here in the year 2000, this graph shows how militarised the border region was by the British Army, mainly in response to the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. So what we have, when I was born in Crossmaglen, and this was our local square here up in the corner, where we have various military establishments or infrastructure around the square. On the side of this near the red car was our video shop or DVD shop. On the other side was our pharmacy. This was in the middle of a town. Drive out that road, and at the back of that there tower there, you have Crossmaglen Rangers Football Club, which is the most successful Gaelic football club in Irish history, but it's a British football club if you go by the politics of the area. But over time, you've seen lots of times where these helicopters here, called Chinooks, landed on the middle of the football pitch during a Gaelic football match, and naturally enough, in a very Republican area, that just put more fuel on the fire, made it worse. I remember growing up in Crossmaglen. Later on, my father built a house out even further, closer to the frontier, a couple of 100 yards, in a place called Cullaville. But when we were in Crossmaglen, these armoured vehicles were the norm. They came round where we lived, and there was a soldier at the top of it with a helmet on and a machine gun pointing at us playing football. That was normal. We didn't know any different. And a big thing with the IRA was to use mortars to attack these various bases. And I remember vividly as a child when we were at school, you would hear the whistle of a mortar coming. So you hear a mortar bomb coming 3 to 5 seconds before it actually hits. So when we were in school, you would hear the whistle and you would go onto your desk because you knew the drill. You waited a couple of minutes and then you get up again, back to work. That was normal life growing up in South Armagh. Other things to remember about the border region was, and even these lookout towers, I'll always remember my father coming in about 4 in the morning. Sorry. And there was a gunshots outside. And he brought me to the side of the room, and scary at the time, but it was to keep you safe from gunshots outside. That was life then, and we were a moderate family in that region, never mind one that was involved in the actual conflict. So as you get from that little wobble I had there, that it wasn't an easy place to live. There was a lot of fear and anxiety in the region, never mind being somewhere where you lost a parent or a loved one. At the same time, we had a number of blocked roads along the region to stop the IRA moving in and out of the jurisdiction. At the moment, there's 310 miles along the border, 275 land crossings. To show you how important that is, we'll go back to the first map. So 275 land crossings in Northern Ireland at the minute. There's less than half along the eastern frontier of the European Union. So if we get a hard Brexit, at least half the roads have to close, because you wouldn't be able to control the movement of people across the border. So straight away, and I remember the morning after the vote, my wife Molly came in and she says, "Guess what?" I go, "No, we're gone." And I go, it was a death in the family. And it really did hit me hard, and Molly was going, "Won't be that bad." And I said, "Molly, this changes the whole lot." So that's what I'm trying to show in the next couple of slides, what that actually means. So growing up in South Armagh, this was a big thing that happened when I was around 20 years old. And to give you the context, I know we have an Italian here and maybe a few more who don't understand where all of this came about. So there's about 800 years of history before this, but back in 1968, we had the civil rights movement in the United States of America. So Martin Luther King's 50th anniversary of his passing away was yesterday. So that sort of ignited a flame in Northern Ireland, and we had our civil rights movement in the late 60s. And the civil rights movement in the 60s was about where Irish Catholics wanted the same rights as people living in England, Scotland and Wales, the other part of the UK. It wasn't about United Ireland. It was about the same rights as the rest of them. The problem there was for Irish nationalists was if you didn't have a job, you weren't allowed to vote. If you didn't have a job, you weren't allowed to buy a house. So you were locked out of the housing market. You were locked out of employment. You had no opportunities and no hope. And strangely enough, the impact of that on Irish people was a valued education more than anything else. It was a way out. But there was a big march between the two main cities in Northern Ireland, which is Belfast and Derry. For Unionists, they call it Londonderry. As a joke I have with Kevin and Kathy. But so there's a march between that there, We Shall Overcome, and they joined arms and what marched across the two cities. And along that way, they were met by abuse, which was sticks with nails in them, or beaten along the way, but they kept the march going. And that was the start of it. And then after that, the British government sent the British troops into Northern Ireland to save and support the Irish Catholics from abuse. So originally started, they were there to look after us. But then it very quickly got out of hand, and the saviour became the abuser, and it lost control of itself over 30, 40 years. So up to the 1998 agreement, this was a big, big, big thing. So thanks to Dr. Owen MacDonald, he brought us up to Queens University on Tuesday night. And we had a speech there by Senator Mitchell, and he was involved in the Good Friday Agreement. And he talked about how it was 5 years worth of work for him alone, but it was in the making for 15 years up to that point. So some of the key things that came out of the Good Friday Agreement was, one, peace, that's enough. But other things was established governance institutions. So the Northern Ireland Assembly was established. That was, or supposed to be, local government for local people, whereby Catholics and Protestants jointly govern the region themselves. No influence from London and none from Dublin. There was various NI, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland linkages. So for us Irish people, it's important that Dublin's their home and they have an involvement. They call it North-South relations. UK-Irish forums, for the Unionists, it's important having the East-West linkage, which is Northern Ireland and London. So the Good Friday Agreement created that tri-party agreement of Ireland, the UK and Northern Ireland working together. Decommissioning and normalisation, so then pictures of South Armagh, where there was lookout towers, army bases, IRA men, the IRA gave up the guns, the army bases went, it became normal. And the last two here, equality and human rights. And this is an interesting one for later on. Importance of respect and tolerance of Irish and Ulster Scots. The traditions of both sides were built into the agreement. Going forward, this place is half run by Irish and half run by British. So we have to look at each person's culture. And we'll see how important that is later on when we see the collapse of the Stormont Assembly. And the final one, this other one, British government committed to incorporate the European Convention on Human Rights. So this is the European Court of Justice. This is one of the big things that enabled the agreement, because it was a common legal framework between the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom. But the European Court of Justice is one of the big things Britain voted to leave with Brexit. So one of the core foundations of peace, Brexit wants to unravel. And the final one in terms of the Good Friday Agreement is self-determination. The people of Northern Ireland alone can decide if they want United Ireland through referendum. But you need the Unionists to agree to have the referendum. That's the tricky bit. So the road to peace, so some pictures here to show you what it was about. John Hume, arguably he was the most important person over 30 years. Never stopped saying the same thing, and he was a key enabler to peace. He was one of the original guys in the march, the civil rights marches in the 60s, and never gave up. Gerry Adams, you all know who he is. He's now retired. Mary Lou MacDonald is the president of Sinn Féin. Martin McGuinness passed away last year of a rare heart disease. You all know your president, Clinton. He was, I know he's controversial in various different ways, but for Ireland, he was the only president who actually put his neck out for the country in terms of he gave Gerry Adams the visa to come in, and he actually put sweat into the whole process. President Obama, Bush, Reagan, Trump, even Kennedy weren't that bothered. They didn't put the effort in. So that alone, being where I'm from, means a lot. And this is David Trimble. His career ended the day they signed the Good Friday Agreement. But as part of the sweetener, they made him a Lord of the British Empire and he got into the upper house. Ian Paisley and the DUP refused to sign the Good Friday Agreement. They were the one party didn't want to go into it. And later on, this happened about 5-6 years later, and I remember at the time seeing that picture. I thought it was remarkable that you had the two extremes sitting at one table. That was a seismic move, change. Decommissioning, it took a good few years, but it happened. And this one here, so where I grew up was along the border. It's called a concession road. So you got County Monaghan, Republic of Ireland, South Armagh in the UK, and then County Louth, Republic of Ireland. There's about a 4-mile strip goes between the two, and it's called a concession road because Irish ambulances could drive into the UK and go out the other side. It's got a concession to go through it. But it was part of the UK. One time I was visiting my parents, and I seen the Irish Gardaí and the PSNI, Police Service in Northern Ireland, together in the UK doing a joint operation. That was a remarkable moment, because I was going, things have really changed here, because these are the two enemies traditionally. Now they're working to try to get the same bad guy. Big progress. But it's not all done. Young Susan, I took her around Belfast, showed her around the different sites, and I remember saying Susan wanted to see the Peace Wall in Belfast. So we drove up through the Shankill, up the falls, and I pulled up. And then Susan was going, "Where's the Peace Wall?" I go, "See the big thing about 20 foot tall with barbed wire and paint stains on it? That's a peace wall. It divides people." There's actually more peace walls now in Belfast than there was during the Troubles. So there's more segregation. Less than 5% of the population is in an integrated education. That means Catholics and Protestants together. We are kept in our own. We play Gaelic football, they play hockey. There is no integration. That's a long-term thing, but it's not something you give up on. You should chip away at it. And we still have some nice police cars around. This one here is bomb-proof and bulletproof, and it's rolled out every summer for the 12th of July, where we have various different riots over orange men marching up and down Catholic neighbourhoods. So, the future. So coming where we came from, being a war zone and a militarised border, to peace and a seamless border where I can drive up and down without any worries. Brexit really, really puts a real spanner into the works. And if that ever happened, that will be a major problem, stepping back in time. So let's look at the European Union. So this here can be, there's a lot of mystery about, or mist around what is the European Union. The European Union is and was the primary aim in Europe to keep peace after World War I and World War II. So anybody who's into history would know that Europe has been ripping itself apart for 1,000 years. They go back before the Roman Empire, and Europeans were having to go with each other. Then we had the two massive wars, World War I and World War II, and we said never again. So how do we stop Europe fighting with itself? You get it more integrated culturally, economically and politically. European Union's growing from there and there and there. United States of America, that's a sort of model where Europe could end up. Different cultures, but they're all on the one flag. 510 million members of the European Union, 28 nations. It's a big thing. There's a lot there. And at the bottom here, I'll put these slides up on the web page afterwards. And you can look through the different countries that are in the European Union. I put in here the blue ones are the ones in the Eurozone, but that's for a different day. So a global player. In the globe, there's three big trading blocks. And three big trading blocks are United States of America, China, and the European Union. So if you want to be part of a big club, you're going to be part of one of them clubs. And you see here, China has 15.5% of exports, 12.9% of imports. United States at 12.2% of exports, 15.9% of imports. This is the trade war Trump is having with China. And the European Union manages the numbers quite well, where it's nearly balanced, slight surplus. So it's a big player. It's not something to be ignored. The core principles of the European Union is free movement of goods, people, services and products. So that's just like being in Connecticut, having a business, and you want to sell into California, you jump in your truck and you drive down the road. There's nothing going to stop you. I know each state has slightly different taxes, but there's no real restrictions in moving your goods and business around the country. You want to relocate to Florida, you can take your money down into a different bank account. That's the way Europe is going. It's free movement. Language is the main problem in Europe. Going and living in Germany, you need German. Going to France, you need French. The two key things, and we'll see this later on when we look at the possible outcomes, is single market. Single market is that piece whereby you go from California to Connecticut, and it's the same rules, generally, of how you do things. You go from Germany to Italy, it's the same rules. The internal market is the same. Then the second one is the customs union, where the European Union acts as one big block. Anything coming in to, say, Spain, hits the same rules as something coming in through Austria. Common barrier, like the United States. When it comes in from China, if it comes into Delaware or Seattle, it makes no difference. You're coming into the United States. So it's that big block. UK and Ireland joined together in '73, and before that they had an agreement called the Common Travel Area, which meant that Irish people could work in the UK and British people could work in Ireland. Okay. What's the EU done for Northern Ireland? Quite a lot. So it was the foundation for peace, because in Northern Ireland, are we okay? Yeah. In Northern Ireland we had, the UK was a member of the European Union, the Republic of Ireland was a member of the European Union, laws were passed in Brussels, and there was a common legal framework for both to work off. That was a key enabler. It's encouraged cross-border police collaboration. Universities in Dublin and Belfast and London collaborate with each other. 87% of farmers' income comes from the European Union through the Common Agricultural Policy. That's a lot of money, and the core reason behind that is that Europe wants to enable itself to survive in the event of a war. Farmers know how to farm, they know how to produce goods. That's why farmers get subsidies to keep animals and crops. And then the final one there is the peace programs 1, 2 and 3. It's 1.3 billion or above, was provided by the European Union to encourage peace in Northern Ireland. So the European Union put a lot of money in because they want the European Union to be more integrated, and integrating Northern Ireland with the UK and the Republic of Ireland was a good use of their funds. The guy who managed the peace programs was a Frenchman called Michel Barnier, and he is the European Union's chief negotiator for the Brexit negotiations. So their main negotiator knows Northern Ireland inside out, and he put a lot of money, or managed a lot of money, to try to stabilise and build a peace. So they have somebody who actually wants it to work. On the British side, their main negotiator is a guy called David Davis, and this shows you the contrast. He grew up in London, single parent family, but he joined early in his career the SAS, and the SAS is like your Marines over here, and he was stationed in Northern Ireland during the Troubles on the British side. So on the European side you have someone who wants the peace to be maintained, and you had one on the other side who actually was fighting against the Irish side. So how that works out. So we're up to the referendum. It was simply said, do we remain a member of the European Union or do we leave? It's as simple as that. So let's look at the campaign now. Let's take back control. So the core message was the European Union is taking things off us. We've no control in our country anymore. Let's give it back to the people. So let's look at some of the key things the Leave campaign said. Give the NHS, which is the National Health Service, more money every week. That's a good thing. Create new jobs with new trade deals. Who doesn't want new jobs? That's brilliant. Our borders, a points-based immigration system. We don't want unskilled labour into our country. That's a big vote getter. Another winner. Deport dangerous foreign criminals. Who doesn't want to do that? You want to get rid of Pablo Escobar. Get him out. And the final one, cut VAT and household energy bills. Lower your running costs for your house. Lower running costs for your house, more jobs, less crime. This is just brilliant. It fixes every ill of the United Kingdom in one go. Tick the box. We're out. So, strong message. On the Leave campaign, there was a lot of sort of fake news which just managed to hit perfect timing. So at the time we had the migrant crisis in Europe, where they're all coming up through the Middle East, through Turkey, into Greece, up through the European Union, and they were spread around eventually. It was a big spike which dropped very quickly, but it was going up to the big spike when the vote was coming. So you had this picture that the UK Independence Party put out of thousands of people making their way to Britain. And that's a very strong message, simple and strong message. And here we have the Cliffs of Dover. So the White Cliffs of Dover is a very beautiful part of England, which is down in the southeast of England, where it's closest to France. And you have a big ferry port and the Channel Tunnel, which connects Britain with France underneath the sea. And here you have an escalator. Let them all in. Let them all in. Come on in and take our benefits, take our jobs. So a simple message, clear message. Here we have the NHS. So if we leave the European Union, we will get 350 million a week extra for the NHS. And that there was a core campaign message where Boris Johnson, the former Lord Mayor of London, drove around in this big red bus saying, we're getting this every week when we leave. But in reality, since they voted to leave, the economy has dropped by nearly 400 million a week because businesses have decided not to invest and actually move jobs out of the United Kingdom. JP Morgan, for example, recently moved 1,000 jobs from London to Dublin. The European Medicines Agency moved 800 jobs with an average salary of about €150,000 from London to Amsterdam. Big jobs are going. Goldman Sachs moving jobs from London to Dublin. Actually has hit the economy very hard. Here we have a contradiction. So, on one side it says in the red, let's make it difficult for freight to move in and out of the country. So, in Crossmaglen, we want to make it hard for a truck to come from Dundalk in the Republic of Ireland into Northern Ireland. That's what that is. We want to stop trade coming and make it harder to come in. And the other one, it says no to the European Union, which is one of the big three trading blocs in the world. Yes to the wider world. Who is the wider world? Is Britain going to roll up to Donald Trump and say, we are going to get a deal from you? It's going to be a one-sided deal. America first. Yeah, they're going to go up to China and get a deal. Britain's population is about 65 million. China is 1.3 billion. They've got no negotiation leverage going that way. So the campaign was, stop the foreigners coming in, make it difficult for goods to come in from different countries, and we're going to get loads of money back. But it was a very simple campaign which got good messages out there which resonate with people. And people have very short memories and don't do analysis when it comes to an election, so it got a lot of traction. The Remain side ran a very poor campaign. All the political parties, except for UK Independence Party, advised their membership to vote to stay. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, the new Prime Minister, all were Remainers. On that side, you see here, the Labour Party came up with, don't risk our NHS, but I thought we were getting 350 million a week extra. Jobs, but we're getting jobs when we kick the foreigners out, don't let them in. Lower prices, but I'm getting lower electricity bills when we leave the European Union. Your rights at work. What's that mean? Europe's telling us what to do. So the rights at work is an important one, whereby leaving the European Union will give workers less rights. The European Union is very concerned about working hours and conditions and minimum wages. So Britain leaving that wants to unwind. That's why they want to leave the European Court of Justice. Other confusing messages was, we want to protect Poland and Hungary. England has about 400,000 Polish people come in since 2003. That was part of the reason to vote to leave. They want less foreigners in. So having a poster saying, let's help Poland out, plays to the other side. Here we have Sinn Féin, which is the Irish Republican Party, preaching to the converted, don't want a leave, so there. It was a no-brainer. Didn't really have to campaign too hard. The Daily Record, all the political parties in Scotland says, don't go. Because Scotland wants to leave the United Kingdom, but wants to leave the United Kingdom and be a member of the European Union. So we keep things simple. And then the final one here, I put up, this was a Brexit special from Ryanair. They're like your Southwest Airlines over here. And it shows you how bad it got. Businesses started coming out with their own campaigns because the politicians weren't delivering. And Ryanair was giving cut prices for people to come back to vote. Come back to vote. We don't want to leave. So the results breakdown. So what we got here, in Northern Ireland, the blue is Remain. So Northern Ireland went along nationalist, unionist lines, or Irish or British. So the border regions closest to the Irish homeland voted to remain. The unionist piece, which would be the old Presbyterians coming in a couple of 100 years ago, voted to leave. And in England, what we see was Scotland was the region that voted most to remain in European Union. So we see over here it was 62% of Scots voted to remain in European Union. London, the most cosmopolitan international city in the United Kingdom, voted to stay in the European Union. People travel open-minded. Here we see this red concentration in the sort of east of England. This region here has a lot of agriculture, so seasonal crops, a lot of seasonal labour involved. Local people don't want seasonal workers in because they'll stay, take our jobs. They voted overwhelmingly to leave the European Union. So that's the map. On the other side here, some breakdown, interesting stats here. Inversely, it was a Conservative Party, which is a bit like your Republican Party over here. They predominantly voted to leave. The Labour Party voted to stay. Age demographics was very important. Old people voted to leave, young people voted to remain. And after the vote happened, there was a whole debate about how can the old people sell us out of our future. And then the final one, education really mattered. So GCSE is the exam you do when you're 16 years old. A-level is the exam you do when you're 18. A higher below degree would be your associate's degree, and degrees your bachelor's, master's, PhD. Educated people voted to stay in the European Union. Young people voted to stay in the European Union. Irish people voted to stay in the European Union. Scottish people voted to stay in the European Union. And London people voted to stay in the European Union. So there's lots of very unhappy people who wanted to stay in the European Union. And the overall vote split down, I don't have it up there, is 52% to go. So it's a marginal win to leave. Okay, the main reason why this all happened was the Conservative Party was fighting with itself. And they have a long-standing tradition where they have a Eurosceptic wing and a Europhile wing, which is basically one pro-Europe, one anti-Europe. And it is an old aristocracy party in terms of British politics, whereby they have the old wealth, the old power, the link to the royalty. They all go to Eton College, and then you get into Oxford and Cambridge, and then you become Prime Minister. The old establishment route is the Conservative Party. So they had an internal battle which they managed to put out into the public domain for the whole country to fight out. David Cameron, I read a good book about him, and he has a career of taking big gambles. And his career showed all these big gambles, and he just got through them, like the Scottish referendum about 3 or 4 years ago. He got through by the skin of his teeth, and the Brexit referendum was one where he gambled too much and he lost. So he resigned the day after. Theresa May became the Prime Minister after 2 weeks of bloodletting within the Conservative Party. Boris Johnson, the guy who drove the red bus with 350 million on the side, broke ranks from the Conservative Party and said, I want to leave the European Union, because he wanted to be the Prime Minister. And the day after the vote, he was they won. It was just about building his profile. Jeremy Corbyn, this guy with the cap on the top side there, will be what you would call a 1970s socialist. Way out there on the left, had no involvement in the 3 Blair governments, and he was basically quiet during the whole campaign. He's anti-Europe, but he just sat on the shelf and said nothing. And then the final one, this man here, Nigel Farage, he was the leader of the UK Independence Party. Their party's whole aim was to leave the European Union. And he was the one who came up with the poster of all the people coming to Europe and the escalator. So it ended up the campaign was him and a few very ambitious Conservative MPs going against the party, and the rest. So the Leave ones had an awful lot of the press, where the rest were very confused with no one message. So, the day, once Theresa May became the Prime Minister after a couple of weeks, she was asked at a press conference, so what is Brexit? And her answer was, Brexit means Brexit. Okay. So I'm going to ask you again, what does Brexit mean? Brexit means Brexit. Okay. Conference is over. So very early on it became very apparent that this was a very complicated thing to do, to leave the European Union, because we've been in the damn thing for 40 years. A lot of integration, that's the goal of the European Union. So a couple of hot spots here to show you through. The sea. So fish do not see international trade boundaries. So when you have a Scottish fish or a French fish, when is it a French one, when is it a Scottish one? When is it an Irish one? Big problem. Air. So we're planes, so we have this open skies agreement between the European Union and the United States of America. So that means you can jump in a plane in Seattle, go to Washington, and then into Paris, and then on to Dublin if you want. Once you get into European space, you're in European space. When you get in American space, you're in American space. So Britain says, okay, we're leaving European Union, but we're not leaving the open skies agreement. But then Paris goes and Dublin goes, oh, you are. Because if they leave the open skies agreement, it becomes a hassle to go through London. So you know all yourselves, when you travel somewhere across the Atlantic, you go, we'll stop in Paris for 2 days. Why don't you add another night in and go and see the Louvre, instead of going to London with all the hassle and extra customs checks. Other hotspots, Northern Ireland, so that's where we all started this journey. Scotland. So early on Scotland says, okay, so if something happens to Northern Ireland and they can keep European Union regulations there, we want the same because we don't want to be part of the UK. And 70% of the government of Scotland is Scottish nationalists. They want to leave the UK but be part of the European Union. So whatever happens in the north of Ireland, they want the same deal. So then Theresa May had a constitutional crisis in the first year going, this could break up the whole UK. So we need to go hard to stop it. Then you have another part of the UK which is down here, logically, on the very southern tip of Spain. It's the Rock of Gibraltar. It's a big military base inside a big rock which goes back to the days of the British Empire across the open seas. So they voted overwhelmingly to stay in the European Union because they have a road right into it and a sea around it. And early on it became a problem. The airport for Gibraltar is on the Spanish side. What do we do? So this is getting more and more complex the more we go on. Catalonia. So this is where Barcelona is in Spain. So they had an illegal referendum for independence. So they also want to leave Spain, but they want to stay in the European Union. So Spain has the same issue as Britain going, if we let something happen easy for Northern Ireland, then Gibraltar, we want to keep Gibraltar, but we want to keep Catalonia as well. So there's lots of different players here with different objectives. Go over to the east and we have Greece and Turkey, long-standing difficulties between both countries, and the migrants were coming through Turkey. Turkey was letting them come through from the Middle East, pushed them into Greece, they're not our problem. So a lot of friction there. And they also have a long-standing version of Northern Ireland in Cyprus. So Cyprus, I visited Cyprus once, and you go to the middle of Cyprus, and Turkey invaded the north side in the 1970s. Cyprus is supported by Greece, and now we have a North Korean style no man's land of a couple of miles where there's hotels with trees growing out of them. It's unfinished business. So what happens there? We want Cyprus to be in the European Union, and Turkey, by the way, is trying to get into the European Union as well. So there's a whole lot of things all around here which makes this very complicated. Okay, so the reality is Britain wants to go out in the sea on its own and trade with the world and be more prosperous at the same time. But things aren't as simple as that. Things aren't good at the moment in terms of Northern Ireland. Two interesting graphs here to show you. Number of households in housing stress. So housing stress is where you're struggling to pay the bills, pay the mortgage, pay the rent. So it's gone from, in 2002, this is national figures, 13,000 to 23,000. It's nearly doubled. So people are struggling to pay the bills. That's a bad sign, and that leads to social problems. The other one here, slightly off the graph there, was suicide rates. 73 people committed suicide, unfortunately, in 1970, and up recently it's 200 and near 80. So it's nearly trebled, or more than trebled, over the period. And the big trigger point for me wasn't so much the troubles, it was economic. What we had in Ireland was there was massive boom in the Republic of Ireland, and the wealth spilled over into the north, and northern people were working in the south. So when the bubble burst, it hit the north very bad as well, and people haven't recovered from that. So these things point towards a region that can't take a real big, bad external shock where it puts people with less prosperity, less money in their pockets. Another one, just to give you the context. So Northern Ireland income, average income is about $30,000. United States is $56,000. There's a swing across the states. The Republic of Ireland is a par with the United States at $56,000, and England's at $38,000. So the Republic of Ireland is a prosperous nation. It used to, for a long time it wasn't. Northern Ireland is not. So if you're going to follow any route map, it will be the European Union one of an open economy. Gross hourly earnings. So just to make this simple, this black line here was income distribution back in 1999, and the shaded one, the dark blue one, is in 2017. The point you want to get from this here is this big spike shows that incomes are compressed at the lowest end of the scale, minimum wage. So the economy went from being a bit more distributed to all concentrated at low incomes. So it's all McDonald's jobs, basic factory jobs, retail jobs, not good jobs for an economy. So it's got worse over the period. This one here is interesting. So the official unemployment rate in Northern Ireland is 3.8%. The Republic of Ireland is 6%. So on the basis of that, you would think Northern Ireland is the one that's booming. But when you look into the data, you find it's not. The number of people who are claiming sickness, taking themselves out of the statistics and taking long-term disability benefits has absolutely exploded since the early 90s. So the overall amount of people out of the workforce is nearly its worst point in the early 80s. So it's not a healthy economy. The numbers are being managed for politics. That's why I call it lies, damn lies, and statistics. So I'll not dwell on this too much, but there was two things. Tony Blair's whole campaign to break the Conservative monopoly in England was education, education, education. And us as Irish nationalists believe in education from the 60s when we were locked out of the job market. So for me, I'm a great believer in education, but because it gives you opportunities and choice. But in Northern Ireland, they're cutting back school sizes, they're closing libraries, they cut the funding for the universities by 10% over the next 3 years. They're cutting the good stuff because of the indecision of the local parliament. On the other side, we have Bill Clinton here, President Bill Clinton, saying, it's the economy, stupid. That was his tagline. So education and jobs really matter. So if the economy's doing well, people are getting educated, opportunities, things work out. But in the last 2 years, this short list here, and there's a lot more than this, are job cuts in Northern Ireland. Big multinationals are leaving because of Brexit. It's a low-wage economy, but it's no good to us if there's a border. Will there be a border? We don't know, but we can't wait until the last minute to find out. We have to move now. So the key message with Northern Ireland is, socially, it's not stable. Economically, it's not prosperous. So the last things you want to do with something like that is put barriers to trade and opportunity on top of it. Especially when you have a peace that still has more peace walls than when the war was on. So it's not the sort of thing you pen in. The other side of the border, you have a different beast completely. And I call it the economic phoenix. So we're all Irish people, we have the phoenix rising out of the ashes, and this is rising out of the ashes. So during the noughties of the early 2000s, the economy was booming, and then bang, it was hit really hard by the Lehman Brothers collapse around 07, 08, and you see the red dips is where the economy's going backwards. Back in them days, people were driving up to Dublin Airport, parking their car, flying to Australia, and gone. The mortgage is gone, the job's gone, the debt's gone, the car's gone, and I'm gone. So, unfortunately, that period was very gloomy time. Everything was bad, taxes going through the roof, couldn't see the wood from the trees. But because Ireland, the Republic, is an opened, pro-business, international economy, it bounced back very quick. And it has all the big pharmaceutical companies in the world, all the big technology companies in the world, all have major operations in Ireland. So they grow with the global economy. And sure enough, it's booming again. Every week there's job creation. Every week there's new investment. The Republic is back to where it was. It needs to lower taxes, but it's going the right way. Oh, and the final point on this one is there's a Brexit bonus. Jobs are coming out of England into Ireland on the chance that Brexit will be bad. So they would jump in now rather than later. An extra stimulus for jobs. But one problem with Brexit, so if it's just about England going off doing their own thing, I'd be fine with it. But the problem is Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and Great Britain, which is England, Scotland and Wales, have been joined at the hip for hundreds of years. Like it or lump it, it's a fact of life. We go to England, they come to us, we trade with them, they trade with us. Very similar culture. Some key stats here, like we'll not go into the numbers here, but Northern Ireland's trade with the Republic is massive. They are heavily reliant on trading south of the border. The Republic of Ireland and UK trade a lot with each other, but the Republic of Ireland trades more with the European Union than it does with Britain. So if you give them a hard choice, Britain or Europe, Europe wins the economic contest. Some interesting stats when I was researching for this. 66% of all cheese in England is Irish cheese. So what happens if you put a tax on milk? Do we lose all the business? Don't know. UK is only 65% self-sufficient in beef. 70% of the balance comes from Ireland. That's a lot of beef. That's a lot of money. And then the final one I put there, UK keeps Ireland's lights on at night. So energy supplies come from England to keep Ireland's lights on at night. So gas, oil through pipes. So one of the early initiatives of the Irish government behind the scenes has been to fast track an interconnector between France and Cork in the south of Ireland. Because if you think about Ukraine and Russia, Russia negotiates by cutting off the gas from Ukraine. You can't heat your home. Do what we tell you. So Ireland's thinking ahead. In the worst case scenario, they need to be with their European partners and not have the chance of getting the energy cut. So this is getting very simple as we go on. Even more simple. So decades of regulatory alignment. So European Union's whole goal is to try to stop a war. How do we do that? We bring things closer together, economically, politically, socially. Two major alignments to consider. The first one is this rules governing livestock. So I'll give you an example. You have a cow and you move it, you rear the cow up in the Republic of Ireland, you move it to Northern Ireland to be processed, then you move the processed meat into England, it's added to a few other products and it becomes a ready meal. So you moved across 3 different countries there, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland and England, or maybe into France for some other products to go with it. The problem with this is the phytosanitary rules means that each European nation follows the same rules for rearing, processing, slaughtering animals. So if you do it in the Republic of Ireland, it's the same rules apply in Germany. So England wants to leave, or United Kingdom wants to leave the European Union. So they want to negotiate their own trade deals. So they want to go to Brazil and get cheaper, lower quality Brazilian beef into the United Kingdom. So if that happens, the European Union has to make sure that the quality of the European herd is maintained, so they have to put up a border and stop the lower quality Brazilian beef coming in the back door through Northern Ireland into the European Union. So an action on a trade deal by Britain could mean we have to stop this stuff coming in. We need a border. And interestingly enough, Theresa May at a press conference a few months ago, when she was pressed on the Irish border, she says, we won't be the ones who build the wall. but it might be the European side that does it. So that was a bit ominous of where her mind was at. Second one is a single passport for trade and services. So Britain wants to negotiate trade deals for goods across the world and get out of the European Union. But this second one they don't want to leave the European Union on. And it came out of the financial crisis 2008. And it relates to if you're a financial institution and you're trading in London, you don't need to apply for regulatory approval in Paris, Berlin or Milan. You've already got all your certificates. So Michael Needham can go and trade in Berlin. No problem. Look, I've got the British certificates. It's all okay. So Britain wants to keep that because the financial industry in London is absolutely huge, one of the global powers. But the European Union said, no, this is not pick and mix. We're a European bloc. You accept the rules of the club or you don't. Because if you don't accept the rules of the club, Spain comes up and goes, well, I want these 4 things but not the rest. Italy comes up, I want these 2 but not the rest. Imagine in America, somebody give Florida opt-out of defense for the United States. And then Colorado goes, well, we don't want to be involved in security, homeland security, we're opting out. Then California goes, we're opting out of infrastructure investments. The whole thing unravels. So European Union cannot break its rules for the bad boy who wants to leave. So, we're up to the game. So this is the game. I call it the game in terms of negotiation. We have the stars and stripes, or the stripes, sorry. It's stars. It's too much American this last week. Stars on a blue background is the European Union flag, and the other one is the British flag. So we're into the chess game. Who's going to get what, where, and when? So just a quick view of where the politics is at with this. So Theresa May is a very weak Prime Minister, and the reason why she's weak is she contrasts markedly from President Trump. So President Trump, so you say to me no, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone. Half the cabinet's gone if you say boo. So Theresa May is the exact opposite, where she has her 3 closest members of her team. You have Boris Johnson, who was a former Lord Mayor of London, campaigned to leave the European Union with the red bus, 350 million. Tried to get her job, and then the party went against her and gave it to her as the unity candidate. So he wants her job and has been working hard to get it ever since. He's the Foreign Secretary. Very important job coming into Brexit. Dr. Liam Fox is the minister responsible for negotiating new international trade agreements. He was a hard Brexiteer. He wanted to leave the European Union. She voted to remain. So he has a key role in the new world. So he's at her top table. Then you had David Davis. He's the ex-SAS Marine who had a couple of runs at the leadership of the party and is a hard Brexiteer. He is Britain's chief negotiator on Brexit. So you have a Remainer with 3 hard leavers as our core team. And every so often she can't shuffle the pack because it'll pull down her government. Other ones, Jeremy Corbyn is basically a ghost in this whole thing. He sits on, his approach is to sit in the fence and see what happens. And it seems to be working for him. His popularity is way up and he's not doing anything. This lady here is a remarkable lady and a strong leader. Nicola Sturgeon of the Scottish Nationalist Party. She's gone quiet, but I expect her to pop up towards the end when it's getting closer to what it actually is going to be, and she'll play the we want a national our old independence vote again because we don't like this. Remember, we voted to stay, and we are the Scottish Nationalist Party as well, so we want to leave the UK. On the Northern Ireland side, so what we have is the perfect mess. So we have the DUP, which, if you remember back to the Good Friday Agreement, originally did not want to join the peace accord. They wanted to be more hardline. Sinn Féin, so Martin McGuinness, before he passed away, raised the issue of the RHI scandal, and this was a renewable energy heat scheme ran by Arlene Foster of the DUP, which ran out of control and cost the taxpayer 500 million for no benefit. So he says we need an independent investigation. You need to step down, not resign, but step to the side to do the investigation. The DUP says no. He says we're pulling down the government. because we're not meeting our own rules of engagement. So he pulled down the government, he passed away, and then the mantle passed on to Michelle O'Neill, the new leader of Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland. Gerry Adams retired. Mary Lou MacDonald became the president of Sinn Féin in the Republic. So a dynamic change there. Then at the same time, what happened was we have, what's he called, the movie, Austin Powers. Yeah. So you have Mini-Me. Mini-Me in this picture is Dr. Evil. Dr. Evil is Arlene Foster, and this is the London paper, the London Evening Standard, whose new editor is the former treasurer, or I forget his name, George Osborne. He was number 2 under Cameron, who voted to stay in the European Union. He resigned the day after, and he's the editor of this paper now in London. But what we have here is the Conservative government. Theresa May ran a snap election to get a bigger mandate because all the polls were telling her that Jeremy Corbyn's hard left Labour Party will be destroyed if we do an election now. So she listened to all the expert polls and she lost her majority and needed to be propped up by somebody else. So she got propped up by the 10 votes of the DUP, Confidence and Supply Agreement. In return, the DUP says, we will support your Brexit legislation if we have a veto, and you have to give us £1 billion as well. 500 million of it is to cover the mess I made, so we scratched that. 250 million for infrastructure, 250 million for sickness benefits. So no real stimulus, covering up a mistake I made. And all this while, Stormont has collapsed because of this, and we haven't had a government in Northern Ireland for a year and a half. So going back to the core tenet of the Good Friday Agreement was self-governance of Northern Ireland by Catholics and Protestants, Irish and British. We haven't had a government in a year and a half, and 2 budgets have been made and signed in London. So we have direct rule without the actual name of direct rule. And the problem with direct rule at the moment is we have the hardline DUP part of the direct rule. So we have the foundation for breaking the whole Good Friday Agreement in London. So it gets more and more simple. Gladly enough, on the other side of the border, the Republic of Ireland, we have general unity in terms when it comes to Brexit. They all want a soft Brexit or no Brexit. They want to have Northern Ireland within the Republic of Ireland, even Fine Gael. And it's one voice, which is good to see. Enda Kenny, before he left the stage, one of the very early things he got from Europe was a commitment from the European Union that in the event of Northern Ireland leaving with Brexit, they could always join the European Union whenever they wanted. There'd be no restrictions. There'd be no application process. They would join if they became United Ireland. They'd be straight into the European Union. The leadership here, Leo Varadkar, the Taoiseach Prime Minister, and Simon Coveney, the Foreign Minister, have actually said we'd like to see United Ireland in our lifetime, which is surprising for their party, which would have been always soft on the border. Micheál Martin would be the main Irish Republican Party in the Republic, and they want United Ireland, and he was involved in the peace process, so it's a no-brainer. And Sinn Féin, their whole reason for being is United Ireland. On the international scene, President Obama came out during the Brexit campaign and said, don't leave because your influence in the world will diminish. And to give you an example of Britain's influence in the world, they've got 1 aircraft carrier and they share it with the French. They do have the nuclear bomb, but they don't have much else. You okay, buddy? It's my daughter, so I can wait. So we have here the leader of the hard exit group, the UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage, helped President Trump on the campaign trail. So immigrants are bad, build the wall, same message, but America is about 5 times bigger than England. And the day after the vote, Nigel Farage was in Trump Tower congratulating President Trump on the campaign. And He was talking at one stage to make him the British ambassador to the United States, but one thing's wrong with that. He's not a member of the government. He was a party on the sides. So, historically, we'd have, and even at St. Patrick's Day recently, we have the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister, goes up to the White House and gives a big bowl of shamrock. The Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, was there with President Trump, and the press asked him, "So, President Trump, what do you think about Brexit?" And his answer was, "It'll be interesting." Conversation over. So, for me, if we think where we come from and the evolving United States through Senator Mitchell and President Clinton, the White House has no interest in what happens really. So that's a worry for me, because we do need the superpower to sort of knock Britain in shape to make sure it doesn't go bad. On the European Union side, we have Angela Merkel, who is Dr. Angela Merkel, who is the Prime Minister for Germany. She just won a third term recently. Strong, hard woman who leads by example. She likes rules and regulations, so there's no chance you're going to have a pick and mix with Angela Merkel involved. She's going to go, these are the rules of the club, take them or leave them. Fall in line or get out. That's her view. Here we have the chief negotiator for the European Union, which is Michel Barnier. He was the guy who managed the 1.3 billion peace money for Northern Ireland. So he understands Northern Ireland, understands the Republic of Ireland, and is very pro-Europe integration. And here we have Donald Tusk. He's the president of the European Council of Ministers, which is all the prime ministers of the other 27 European nations who will stamp the final Brexit deal. He wants Britain to stay in, and I actually like him a lot. He's ex-Polish prime minister. He says it as it is, and he's very gloomy about what's happening. So if I ever want to know what's happening, I go on Google, see what he's just said, and he'll tell you what's actually happened. So we're getting towards the end. The main issues being negotiated. The divorce bill. So what we have in the divorce bill was the European Union said, let's take a drink, sorry. So the divorce bill. Britain's leaving the European Union. We're leaving it because we don't want to give them any more money to spend on other countries which are weaker than us. So in the press, Britain says we're paying nothing, we're leaving, we're gone, we're finished. Then the European Union says, no, you owe us about 50 billion for leaving. And I go, no, we don't, we're gone. We're paying you nothing anymore. So then what happened was the Treasury Minister in Britain said to the government, we can't walk away from international agreements. If you walk away from an international agreement, nobody's ever going to give you a loan again. It's like going into a car lot, getting a loan of $5,000, driving out with the car and saying, I'm not paying you anything. And then you go back in 5 years' time and go, can I have a loan? No, not getting it. So after a lot of bravado, the ends up, Britain has to pay 50 billion to leave the European Union, and they're going to pay it over the next 30 years. So part of that cost is due paying pensions and all the rest. But it's a big bill where they pay a lot of money out and get nothing back. So they're definitely going to lose money for leaving. They're not getting the 350 million a week for the NHS. Second one, the free movement of people. This is the core principle of the European Union. When you're a member of the Union, you can move around. I can get a job in Berlin and Germany tomorrow, no problem. It's just the language. Nothing's going to stop me. I can go to Paris. That's fine. Go to Belfast, go to Dublin. You move around. So Britain has issues with the NHS. It needs European doctors. But that's a special deal. We do that and say, no, it's the same rules. If you want European doctors, you have to let the rest in. That's the way Europe's looking at it. Seasonal workers to pick all the fruit. They have a shortage. Local people won't do the job. Can we have a special visa program for the summer? No. It's the same rule, free movement of people. Type of trade deal for goods and services, so that's the model we'll look at now in a second. And then the final one is the rule of law, the European Court of Justice. If you remember back at the very start of this, I talked about the common bedrock for the Good Friday Agreement was the European Bill of Rights, which is underpinned by the European Court of Justice. The whole legal structure of the European Union helped peace happen in Northern Ireland. Britain wants to leave that as one of the core objectives. So Michel Barnier came up with this slide back in, I think, November last year. I'll just explain it. So we have the European Union here, and all these different flags are different trading relationships outside of the European Union that the European has with them. So we have Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein here, whereby it's very close relationship, but there's a border with a 2-hour delay, but they're very close to each other. Then we have Switzerland, Ukraine, Turkey, and then finally South Korea and Canada. So with Britain's red lines, the relationship they're going towards is the one Britain has with, European Union has with Canada. Why did he say that? No European Court of Justice jurisdiction. So Europe don't want anything to do with European Court of Justice or European Bill of Rights. We want out of that, the foundation of the Good Friday Agreement. No free movement of people. So we don't want people to drive from Belfast to Dublin without a border. So we have to get out of that. No substantial financial contribution. So we don't pay any money into Europe. We want out of that. Regulatory autonomy. So we want to make our own rules for beef. We want out of that. So when you go through all of the red lines in their negotiating position, we end up with a deal that took 7 years to be agreed with Canada and the European Union, which is a hard border. So that's where we stand at the moment. And that slide, I'll put these up on the web page next couple of days. All the red lines break the Good Friday Agreement. The only thing that meets the Good Friday Agreement is staying in the European Union. So this is where we get to the real negotiating standpoint, whereby early on there was a 10 Downing Street where the Prime Minister lives and works in London. The Brexit negotiator David Davis was walking out with a bundle of papers, and he scribbled on the bottom of his papers, "Have our cake and eat it." So I have up here, there's 2 machines. Have your cake, eat your cake, but they can't make them work at the same time. So Britain wants it all, but it can't get it. So there's a number of different options that will possibly come out of this. The worst case ones are a hard Brexit. Now what's a hard Brexit? Hard Brexit is they leave both the single market and customs union. So this is where we go towards a scenario which is like Poland and the Ukraine, where there's 8 to 12-hour delays on the border. Hard border. And that would not go down well. The other option, Nigel Farage was in Dublin in fall of last year, and he attended a conference by a number of anti-European Irish academics, and they discussed our exit. Ireland exiting the European Union and getting a closer relationship with the United Kingdom. Let's reel back the years. So what I have here is a picture from the early 19th century or 20th century, and you might be able to see it there, but England is the old lady and she has a dog on a leash, which is the island of Ireland. So socially, politically and economically, it doesn't make sense to go back in with the United Kingdom in the new union. So I hope I'm right, but I don't think that's got any hope. Best case outcomes for us, revote and reverse. So we got a lot of traction on that in the last 8 months, but it's been put to bed completely. They've signed off the date they're going. It's going to happen. And all the parties have agreed, okay, it's going to happen. What is it going to be? So, and then also I have here, who will speak for England? England voted to leave. England is the one in Parliament with control of the power. They want to leave. They're not going to reverse it. So the deal is done. Soft Brexit. A little bit of hope for this one. And this is where we have, in all instances, bar name, we are doing the same thing, but have a badge differently. Could happen. And then the final one is United Ireland. So, may seem like a long shot, but in December, the European Union agreed with Britain various different options on Ireland, and one of them was called the backstop. And the backstop option is, in the event of a bad deal on Brexit, Northern Ireland will apply the same rules exactly as the European Union. The island of Ireland will be seen as the European Union, and the border with European Union will be the Irish Sea. So this got me excited, and then we were going up to a press conference. I wasn't, but Theresa May was going to a press conference in Brussels. She was flying in Leo Varadkar was flying in on a Monday morning to meet the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, and the President of the European Union, Jean-Claude Juncker, to say, we got this, this is a big thing. We're moving forward, because if England sees it as its own entity, you can achieve all your red lines, and if we see Ireland as its own European entity, we keep the Good Friday Agreement. It's win-win all over the place. So Theresa May was coming in, Leo Varadkar was coming in. She got off the plane, she's going to a press conference. She got a phone call from Dr. Evil, Arlene Foster, and she says, no, you cannot sign up to that, or we pull our 10 votes from your confidence and supply agreement. Coalition collapses. So no. So Theresa May is standing there at the platform. I was here to tell you something, but I'm not. We're going to keep discussing the issue. So we got a really worrying trend here. And if you wheel back to when the confidence supply agreement was made, the way the British Parliament works is you get your government together and then you drive up to the Queen in Buckingham Palace and she seals it off, her government. So there's a whole formal process to form your government, and you have to set the date you're going to do it in a couple of days in advance, because the Queen's a busy woman. So they agreed the Thursday, and they hadn't done the deal with the DUP, and it had to be postponed twice because the DUP was trying to wring more out of Theresa May. So they have pedigree of pulling the carpet at the last minute. That's a big worry. So United Ireland, it meets the objectives of the Good Friday Agreement, keep the island as one entity for trade, free movement of people, goods and services. Having Great Britain, which is England, Scotland and Wales, as an entity meets all their red lines that they want to leave, especially the English bit. They're the ones who wanted to go. So it makes sense in lots of levels. But we have a little problem where we have the 12th of July where they burn the European Union flag, the Irish flag and the Pope. It won't be an easy sell to get it over the line. So, some concluding remarks. At the moment, I'm not optimistic because the DUP is propping up the Conservative government. It seems like some form of border is inevitable. So any border is a bad thing for me, going where I came from. Economic storm winds ahead. Northern Ireland's not fit for any sort of shock. It's not in good shape. The Republic of Ireland could take a shock and bounce back and be stronger for it, but the North wouldn't. The problem with that then is, will you stir the hornet's nest? You put a wall up where we had 20 years of progress and you make people poorer, people have their backs to the wall, what happens next? So some key dates going forward. We will know what Brexit is by October, November of this year, and then the other 27 parliaments of 27 nations of the European Union have to ratify the deal in their own parliaments. That takes 6 months or so. Then Britain's official date leaving the European Union is 29th of March 2019, and then there's a thing called a transition period. And what that basically means is that businesses will know what the deal is and they have a year and a half or so to figure out how do we get our computer systems in place, our employment contracts, reconfigure our supply chains, do all of that stuff, which is quite a short period of time. Companies are jumping now because they go, that's too much short notice. So, Brexit will be completely done by the 21st of January 2021. So, questions?
Thank you, Dr. Needham, for being here this evening. Really appreciate your perspective on this. And also, we participated in a meeting the other night, Tuesday night at Quinnipiac, which I thought was significant. Significant enough in a couple of ways. One, we had Senator, United States Senator Chris Murphy. We had the Irish ambassador, and we had Senator Mitchell. And you couldn't have gotten a better perspective of this whole thing. As good as your presentation was, when you talked to Mitchell, who was there when the parties wouldn't even get into the same building together, you really got a perspective of how this all progressed. So I appreciate you being here. But I think the point they made, and it should be made tonight, is we as Americans, as United States citizens, are instrumental in this whole process. There would have been no Good Friday Agreement, in my opinion, if it was not for the influence of the American people. So please, we cannot give up. We sometimes become more Americanized than we come and forget our roots. We need to keep our roots in line. So again, thank you for being here. If I may ask a two-parted question. First of all, what do you find is the common thread between the election of Donald Trump and Brexit? And the second part is you talk about the diminishment of the economy in Northern Ireland. Is this an instrument to bring a united Ireland?
Good. First question, parallels with Trump and Brexit and how he got into power. Definitely big parallels in terms of how the campaigns read. Trump went after this sort of low-skilled, disenchanted voter who was sort of ignored by the political establishment. Brexit was a backlash against the establishment, and Trump's campaign was a backlash against the swamp in Washington. So a lot of parallels, and how the campaign was ran as well. Trump's campaign was ran on a shoestring, and he did it very well. Clinton had a lot more money and the usual media outlets and the usual experts, but got no traction. Brexit campaign, the Leave campaign didn't have much money, but got all the media attention. So they were same playbook, same result. It'll be interesting to see how the parties react to this in future elections. Second question, sorry, Owen, was about the
diminishment of the economics in Northern Ireland. Will that drive the unity of Ireland as a whole?
Could do. Cousin of mine, he works for a number of hedge funds. And I was saying to him, talking to him over a beer, and I said, this is really bad, this is terrible. He goes, no, Mike, this is perfect. And he said to me the reason why it was perfect was, let the place fall apart, and then the case for joining the Republic is even stronger. So it might take a while, but when people's feet are on the knees, and Senator Mitchell the other night said, in the early part of the negotiation, he went to Ian Paisley and says, have you ever been in the Republic of Ireland? It's not the hedonistic hellhole that you think it is. So he brought up a Protestant academic from Trinity College to speak to him to say, it's not that bad down there. It's actually quite open and a nice place to visit, as you all Americans would know. But so there is an argument, let it fall over and then be rescued, like an East Germany, West Germany piece. The East, it was better to join the West and keep going the way it was, you know. So it might take a while. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean.
My position to you that, because the way our president was voted for, the president was voted for is now our president. You can disparage it as far as his education goes or doesn't, but wouldn't the Brexit thing have been easier to dissuade if they went away from the sterling and went to the euro, and if they actually integrated themselves fully into the EU?
Yeah.
Because when you have an open border issue where you have neighborhoods disappearing in London and England, where people are no longer safe to go into the area without being Muslim, wouldn't you think that them actually fully embracing the euro would have helped them from leaving? Because they kept the sterling till now.
Yeah.
That's a question to you.
So the whole euro debate in Britain was, I suppose this was the seeds of where it was going wrong. Britain met the criteria to join the euro when Ireland joined it, but they opted not to go into it because of the whole national question of, do we really want to have tighter integration with Europe? They've been very much the reluctant member of the European Union from the day one. And that's the overhang of the British Empire, where they had a third of the world, and now all of a sudden we're in bed with our two big enemies, which are France and Germany. And Germany is the strongest economy in Europe. Angela Merkel is the strongest leader in Europe, and what she does, people tend to do. So they couldn't stomach being part of a bigger club and their whole empire declining, which it has done for the last 150 years. So, good.
Is
No, there's 19 countries use the euro. There's I have it on the slide here. So which countries don't? The ones in blue at the bottom, if you can see them. So Bulgaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Hungary, Poland, Romania, Spain, Sweden, United Kingdom. They don't meet the fiscal rules to get in. So you need to have a tight economy that can be aligned with the other nations to get in. Greece is the outlier, where they didn't fit the conditions and they've been struggling with it ever since they joined the euro. So I'm glad I did that now.
I have a question. I watched some debates of the Welsh. Some debates of the Welsh and the Scottish Parliament, and I can tell you that they were not too thrilled about the 1 billion going to Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Now, does England, as a separate country, have its own parliament? Or is it Westminster? Westminster is a parliament of Great Britain. Does England have a separate parliament?
No.
As Scotland or Wales?
They have their own. So I'll let you finish your question first. And then. So it's about whether England has its own parliament.
An English parliament,
Yep.
or is England represented in the Parliament of the United Kingdom, or do they have a separate parliament as Wales and Scotland does?
Okay. So no, they don't. So Scotland has their own parliament in Edinburgh. Wales has its own parliament in Cardiff. Northern Ireland has its own parliament in Belfast. Westminster is the English parliament. So there has been calls for English independence from some people to create their own parliament or cede from the other regions. But Theresa May is very much keen to keep the union together.
Yeah.
There is a London Assembly, which is it's London's own parliament.
Okay.
That's just for the city of London.
Regarding the border, I smuggled butter from into Auckland, and I'm talking to my cousins again, maybe starting up a new smuggling operation. What do you think?
So we're on tape here talking. But it could be a good idea. Yep.
That are based in London and soft Brexit, hard Brexit.
Yep.
Or just a Brexit.
Yep. So London, because it was part of the British Empire for a long time, it was a big financial trading hub for hundreds of years, and that's why the single passport, you remember I mentioned earlier on, they want to keep the same rules and trade the same way as it does with all the European nations at the moment. They want to keep that, but Europe's using that as a chip against them to say, if you want that, you have to take the soft Brexit route. But the other one about London's power as a financial trading house is being diminished because the big winner of Brexit so far has been Frankfurt in Germany. A lot of jobs are moving from the big financial institutions from London to Germany. So London's power as a financial powerhouse in the world is diminishing. And they voted to stay. Yeah. So Sterling collapsed after the vote as well.
Just a question. You perked up a little interest I had when you mentioned that the Brexit man had met in Dublin with some Irish academics on Ireland leaving the common market. I hadn't heard much about that before. How much support for it, and what's it based on in a republic?
Yep. So the question there was about our exit. So Ireland leaving the European Union and getting a tighter union with the United Kingdom. Return to the past as such. In terms of support for it, minimal, very few. There was maybe a couple of hundred at the event. It was academic leading from one of the colleges in Dublin, and Farage came in to encourage people to rise up and go for it. The context for that there was that Britain and Ireland are key trading partners with each other, and they could prosper a lot more outside of the European Union, holding them back. And one of the key arguments they used in that debate was that France has been trying to get Ireland to increase its corporation tax rate because they want to win the American businesses into France and not Ireland. So Ireland has 12.5% tax rate for corporations, very competitive, very attractive for the Googles, the Facebooks, the Intels of the world. So France wants to get that, and Farage says Europe will get that eventually off you, so you better jump when you have a chance and we'll give you a better deal in the UK. But I can't see it getting popular support. There is no debate about it. Any questions?
Do you think the American dollar will ever catch up to the English pound when it comes to its value?
No.
Why?
It's not a big enough economy. It's not stable enough.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Could you guys give Dr. Needham a nice hand? Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I think this man deserves a pint.
Hey.
Nice there.